In 18th century Austria, nestled among rolling green hills, lay the enchanting village of Fredericksburg. Wooden cottages lined the narrow paths, flowers bloomed by every window, and the air carried the scent of fresh bread and wild lavender. Life here moved slowly, wrapped in peace. Among its people lived Lucas, a young man whose smile warmed even the coldest day. With golden hair and eyes full of quiet dreams, he was admired not just for his looks, but for his kind, gentle soul. Children adored him, elders respected him, and young girls watched him with silent admiration. Lucas wasn't just part of Fredericksburg, he was its heartbeat, its melody of love and light. The crisp autumn air of Ashford carried whispers, rumors that spread like wildfire across the village. In the wake of Henrik's death, the once peaceful home of the Anderson family had become a battleground of accusations, lies, and betrayal. It all began on a cold evening when Anna and Maria, Lucas's sisters-in-law, confronted the two brothers. Their voices trembled with feigned distress, but their words cut deep. "Lucas," Anna cried, he tried to force himself on me. In the dead of night, he came to my room attempting to violate me." Maria chimed in, her voice a shaky whisper. I thought I saw the same with my own eyes. He made advances toward me too." Their claims were nothing short of shocking, a horrible betrayal of the trust and kindness Lucas had always shown them. The entire village seemed to freeze in disbelief as they had all known Lucas, a kind-hearted, gentle soul who would never harm a fly. But in the face of such accusations, no one dared speak in his defense. When Michael and Stephen returned home that evening, they found their wives in tears, huddled together, their faces pale with fear and shame. The brothers, who had always trusted Lucas, now found themselves torn between family loyalty and their wives' cries for justice. "Lucas, how could you?" Michael spoke, his voice trembling with uncertainty. His eyes were filled with anger and something darker, betrayal. "Why would you do such a thing?" Stephen, usually the more reserved of the two, stood silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The weight of the accusations seemed to crush him, though he couldn't shake the nagging doubt in his heart. The wives spoke again, their voices rising in unison. "He's dangerous. He's no longer the man we thought he was. We can't allow him to remain in the house." It was then that the decision was made. The brothers, driven by their wives' claims and their own shaken trust, did the unthinkable. "Lucas," Michael's voice was cold, "you must leave. You've brought shame upon this family." Stephen stood behind his brother, unable to voice his own objections. He too had been swept up in the tide of his wife's accusations. "We have no choice. Leave now, Lucas." The words stung. Lucas's heart shattered in that moment, the weight of the betrayal by his own blood crashing down upon him. His hands trembled as he gathered his belongings. His world had crumbled in the blink of an eye. His family, his home, his peace. Everything had been ripped away. But one thing remained: his fiddle. The fiddle, an instrument that had been passed down through generations, held memories of laughter, of warmth, and of endless evenings spent with his father, playing tunes that echoed through the woods of Ashford. It had always been his refuge, his companion in moments of solitude. Lucas took the fiddle in his hands, running his fingers over its smooth wood one last time. He paused, looking around the house, the home that had once been filled with love, now a place of sorrow and confusion. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know what the future held. All he knew was that Ashford, his home, his brothers, his father, was now behind him, a painful memory that would never fade. He had no choice but to leave, to escape the whispers, to escape the betrayal. With the fiddle tucked securely under his arm, Lucas stepped out into the fading light of the day. His heart heavy but his resolve unwavering, he walked away from the life he had known, disappearing into the dense forest that bordered the village. Every step away from Ashford felt like a step deeper into an uncertain future. But he was determined to face it. He would no longer be the man they wanted him to be. He would carve his own path, and with his music, he would find solace once more. His father's memory and the music they had shared would guide him, no matter where the road led. After days of wandering through dense forests and lonely roads, Lucas found himself on the outskirts of Vienna, the great city near the heart of the Austrian Empire. Exhausted and hungry, he stumbled upon a magnificent garden, unlike anything he had ever seen. The garden was a peaceful haven, filled with colorful blossoms and ripened fruits hanging from vines that twisted around stone pillars. It was a place of serenity, untouched by the troubles of the world. Little did he know, this was no ordinary garden. It belonged to Princess Isabella, the daughter of the mighty King Frederick. Lucas, weary from his journey, collapsed onto the soft grass beneath the shade of a large tree. The soothing scent of flowers and the warmth of the sun lulled him into a deep sleep. He had found peace, even if for a fleeting moment. The next morning, as the first light of dawn kissed the earth, Princess Isabella arrived in the garden. She walked gracefully among the flowers, her eyes scanning the beauty she had so carefully cultivated. But as she turned a corner, her gaze fell upon the young man lying on the grass. Lucas, unaware of her presence, slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. Fury sparked in her heart. Her garden was a place of refuge, not for strangers to trespass. With an angry stride, Isabella approached him and, without hesitation, slapped him hard across the face. "How dare you?" she shouted, her voice filled with disdain. "This garden is sacred. You have no right to rest here." Lucas jolted awake, his heart racing as he looked into the furious eyes of the woman standing above him. He attempted to sit up, but the shock and the pain from the slap left him stunned. He scrambled to his feet, but the princess had already turned on her heels, her back stiff with anger. "Leave my garden immediately," she commanded coldly, her voice cutting through the silence. Lucas, confused and humiliated, took a step back, his eyes lowered. He didn't belong here. He didn't belong anywhere. With his heart heavy and his spirit crushed, he made his way to the edge of the garden. He stood there staring at the vibrant flowers, the beauty of the place now lost on him. His tears mixed with the dew on the grass as the weight of his situation overwhelmed him. Memories of his father, the home he had lost, and the bitter sting of betrayal flooded his mind. His stomach growled, the pang of hunger gnawing at him, but it was the emptiness inside that hurt the most. As the sun began to set, the garden fell into a quiet stillness. Lucas reached for his fiddle, his only companion in this desolate world. He cradled it in his hands, closed his eyes, and began to play, a mournful tune that seemed to echo his soul's deepest sorrow. The sweet, haunting melody carried through the garden, its sorrowful notes dancing on the evening breeze. Unbeknownst to him, Princess Isabella, who had been on the other side of the garden, heard the distant strains of his music. The sound seemed to seep into her heart, tugging at something deep within her. The pain in his music, the raw emotion it conveyed, spoke to her in a way words could not. It was as if she could feel his sorrow, his loneliness, and his yearning for something more. Her feet carried her toward the source of the music, and as she drew closer, she saw Lucas sitting at the edge of the garden, his eyes closed, lost in the haunting tune he played. For the first time, something stirred within her, a deep, unexpected feeling. She couldn't quite place it, but she knew this man, this stranger who had trespassed in her garden, had touched something within her heart. As his melody wove through the air, Isabella stood in the shadows, mesmerized by the pain and beauty in his music. The anger she had felt earlier seemed to melt away, replaced by something unfamiliar, a spark of compassion, of understanding. Slowly, without realizing it, her heart began to soften toward him. As the days passed, the haunting melody of Lucas's fiddle continued to linger in the garden, weaving its way into the heart of Princess Isabella. Something in his music had touched her soul, awakening a side of her she had long buried beneath the walls of her royal duties. She could not ignore it. His pain, his loneliness, and the raw emotion in his music stirred her heart in a way she could not explain. One morning, unable to keep away any longer, Isabella decided to seek him out once more. She walked toward the edge of the garden, a basket of food in hand, her heart beating faster with every step. When she found him sitting beneath the same tree where he had once slept, his fiddle resting beside him, she hesitated for a moment. The sight of him, alone, silent, his features worn from hardship, tugged at her. Clearing her throat softly, she approached. "Lucas," she said gently, surprising him. He looked up, startled to see her, his face a mix of confusion and gratitude. "I brought you some food." He blinked, a touch of disbelief in his eyes. "For me?" She nodded, kneeling beside him. "You've been through much. No one should suffer alone. Eat, please." He hesitated for a moment, then took the food from her. Their fingers brushed ever so slightly, and for a brief second, both felt the spark of something more. She watched him as he ate, his face softening with each bite, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth toward him. She had never felt this kind of tenderness before, especially not for someone of his station. I don't understand why you're helping me," Lucas said, his voice tinged with both gratitude and confusion. Isabella smiled softly, her eyes meeting his. "Maybe I see something in you that others don't. You're not just a stranger. You're someone who carries pain in his heart. But still, you have a light in your eyes. I admire that." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the unspoken connection between them growing stronger. Finally Isabella stood, offering her hand to him. "Come with me," she said softly. "I want to show you something." Lucas stood, feeling a mix of curiosity and hesitation. He followed her, not knowing where this path might lead, but somehow trusting her, even though he barely knew her. She led him through the gates of the garden, toward the towering walls of the royal palace. Isabella brought him into the palace's grand halls, past the courtyards and ornate tapestries that lined the walls. She took him to her father's chambers, where King Frederick sat, poring over royal documents. "Father," she said, her voice firm but respectful, "I've brought someone to meet you." The king looked up, his expression a mix of curiosity and mild concern. "Who is this, Isabella?" "This is Lucas, the young man who has been staying in the garden. I believe he is in need of work and purpose. I want him to join the palace staff." King Frederick looked at Lucas with careful eyes. He had heard the whispers of the young man's skills, particularly his music, and had taken note of the sadness that seemed to follow him. After a moment of contemplation, the king nodded. "Very well," he said, in a voice that carried the weight of command. "We will give him a place here. Let him prove his worth." And just like that, Lucas's life began to shift. From the garden to the palace, from loneliness to the glimmer of hope. Isabella's gesture of kindness had opened the door to a new life for him, one where he could leave behind his past and start afresh. As days passed, Lucas settled into his new role within the palace. He played his fiddle for the royal family, bringing warmth and emotion into the cold stone halls. His music echoed through the chambers, but it wasn't just his playing that began to catch Isabella's attention. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet dignity in his every move, and the way he treated her with such care and respect. Over time, Lucas found himself drawn more and more to the princess, the tenderness in her eyes, the kindness she showed him, the moments when she would sit beside him while he played. These small gestures grew into something much more. He realized that he had fallen for her, but neither of them spoke of it, not yet. However, word of their growing closeness soon reached the ears of the palace secretary, who had a keen eye for royal matters. It wasn't long before whispers spread throughout the palace corridors, reaching King Frederick himself. It was the beginning of something neither Lucas nor Isabella had planned, but fate had already set the wheels of their destiny into motion. As the days passed in the grand halls of the palace, Lucas continued to play his music, filling the royal chambers with melodies that seemed to weave through the very heart of Princess Isabella. His days were spent with her, growing closer with each passing moment, though neither spoke openly of the feelings that stirred in their hearts. Their connection, tender and unspoken, was as fragile as the first buds of spring. One afternoon, as Lucas sat in the royal chambers, strumming his fiddle softly, a page entered and bowed before him. "The king requests your presence in the throne room," the page said, his voice calm but firm. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. What could this be about? He followed the page through the long corridors of the palace, his steps heavy with uncertainty. As he entered the grand throne room, he was met by the regal figure of King Frederick, sitting upon his throne, his piercing gaze fixed on him. "Come forward, Lucas," the king called out, his voice commanding yet warm. Lucas hesitated but obeyed, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesty." The king studied him for a moment before speaking, his tone direct. "Tell me, Lucas, where do you come from?" The question caught Lucas off guard. He had never imagined the king would ask about his past. His mind raced for a moment before he found the courage to answer. "I come from Ashford, a village far from here," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves rising within him. "I lived there with my father, Henrik, and my brothers, Michael, Stephen, and Lucas. But I was cast out, after the death of my father, my brothers, and their wives." He trailed off, not wanting to relive the pain of that moment. "I left everything behind, and I wandered until I found my way here." The king listened intently, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he spoke again, his voice softening slightly. "I see. Well, Lucas, you have proven yourself here in my palace, and I have been watching you. You have shown great dignity, and my daughter, Isabella, has grown fond of you." At those words, Lucas's heart raced. Could it be? Was the king truly speaking of what he thought? "Isabella has spoken highly of you," King Frederick continued. "I believe you are a man of honor, and I am willing to give you a chance. I will have you marry my daughter, but only if you bring your family here. You must bring your brothers and their wives with you, and we shall settle this matter once and for all." Lucas stood frozen for a moment, a flood of emotions overwhelming him. Isabella, his heart's deepest desire, had spoken of him with such respect, such affection. The king was giving him a chance to make amends, to start a new life with the woman he had come to love. His mind raced with thoughts of his brothers, the life he had left behind and what it meant to bring them here. "I will go at once, Your Majesty," Lucas finally replied, his voice filled with gratitude and determination. "I will return with them." The king nodded, his stern gaze softening. "Do not disappoint us, Lucas. The future of the realm and my daughter's happiness rests in your hands." Lucas left the palace, his heart brimming with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. As he made his way back to Ashford, the journey felt different. This time he wasn't just a wandering soul, he was a man with a purpose, a man with a future, and a man who would soon have the woman he loved by his side. When he arrived at the village, he was met with a cold reception at first. His brothers, Michael and Stephen, had heard of his return and stood waiting at the edge of the village. The tension in the air was palpable as Lucas approached, his heart pounding in his chest. But as he came closer, his brothers' faces softened. They stepped forward, their eyes filled with regret. "Lucas," Michael began, his voice low, filled with sorrow. "We were wrong. We should have never turned our backs on you. We let our wives control us and we betrayed you. We are sorry, brother. Please forgive us." Tears welled in Stephen's eyes as well, and he reached out to embrace his brother. "We've missed you, Lucas. Please let us make things right." Lucas stood there for a moment, his heart a mix of emotions. He had carried the weight of their betrayal for so long, but now in the light of their genuine remorse, something inside him began to heal. "I forgive you," Lucas said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I have news for you. The king has invited us to the palace. He has agreed to my marriage with Isabella, and I want you all to come with me." At the mention of Princess Isabella, the brothers' faces lit up with astonishment. Michael's jaw dropped. You mean to say that you are to marry her?" "Yes," Lucas replied, his eyes gleaming with hope. "The king has given his blessing. We are to be married, and he wants you all to come." The news was met with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. They hadn't expected such a turn of events, but the joy in their hearts was unmistakable. They quickly made preparations for their journey back to the palace, and as they left Ashford, there was a sense of new beginnings in the air. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, was behind them. Now a new chapter awaited. And so, they journeyed toward the palace, where Isabella and Lucas would begin their life together, and the kingdom's future would unfold in ways they could never have imagined. The grand halls of the royal palace were filled with excitement, as preparations for the wedding of Princess Isabella and Lucas were well underway. However, little did Isabella know, the events that were about to unfold would shatter her dreams and heart in a way she could never have imagined. One evening, as the preparations continued, a messenger arrived at the gates of the palace, bearing a letter sealed with the royal insignia of King Hans. The letter was addressed to King Frederick, and as the king read the contents, his face grew grim. The letter conveyed the other king's formal approval for the marriage between Princess Isabella and his son, Prince Edmund. The message also stated that Prince Edmund and his entourage would arrive the following day, ready for the wedding. King Frederick, though shocked, quickly composed himself. He was aware of his own promise to Isabella that she would marry Lucas, the man she had grown to love. Yet the circumstances had changed, and the pressures of diplomacy were too great to ignore. Later that night, in the silence of his chambers, King Frederick called for Isabella. When she entered, her face lit up with a hopeful smile, eager to hear news of her impending marriage to Lucas. But what her father said next left her speechless. "Isabella," the king began, his tone more serious than ever, "your wedding to Lucas will not happen as planned. I have received a message from King Hans. His son, Prince Edmund, will marry you instead." Isabella's heart sank. She could hardly comprehend the words. "But father, I love Lucas. We've already planned everything." The king's gaze softened, though his words were firm. "This is not just about love, my dear. This is about securing alliances. Prince Edmund will arrive tomorrow, and we must respect tradition. The marriage will take place with him. And your union with Lucas, though sincere, will have to wait." Isabella stood frozen, unable to speak. Her dreams of marrying Lucas, the man who had stolen her heart, were slipping away in an instant. The following day, Lucas and his family had finally arrived at the palace, having traveled from the distant village of Ashford. They were filled with anticipation, eager to see the princess and celebrate the marriage they had been promised. But as they arrived, the palace was bustling with activity. No one had told Lucas what was happening. He was escorted to a different part of the palace, unaware that Isabella's wedding was already underway. His heart soared with excitement as he expected to meet his beloved princess and begin their life together. Meanwhile, Isabella, devastated by the turn of events, was forced to comply with her father's wishes. The royal custom dictated that, on the day of the wedding, the bride and groom would not be allowed to see each other before the ceremony. And so she stood, veiled and anxious, her heart torn between her duty and the love she had for Lucas. As the ceremony unfolded, the words exchanged between Princess Isabella and Prince Edmund felt foreign and empty to her. She had agreed to this union only out of duty, but her heart remained with Lucas. The traditional customs dictated that they would be married without ever seeing one another's face, and they left the ceremony without a single glance shared between them. Later that night, after the wedding feast had ended and the royal chamber doors had closed, Princess Isabella sat in her bridal chambers, her mind swirling with confusion and heartbreak. She had just married a man she did not love, a man who was the very image of Lucas in many ways, but not the one who held her heart. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what had happened. But in the quiet of the night, as the last rays of the setting sun slipped from the sky, she heard the soft voice of her new husband, Prince Edmund, call her name. As he approached her, Isabella felt a sinking feeling in her chest. "You are beautiful, my princess," Edmund said gently, though his voice lacked the warmth she had hoped for from Lucas. When the lights were dimmed and the wedding bed awaited, Isabella could no longer keep up the facade. Her heart broke as she turned to face her husband, only to find that the face she had hoped for was not the one lying beside her. The man in her bed was Prince Edmund, not Lucas. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the mistake that had been made, the betrayal, the misunderstanding that had stolen her chance at true happiness. "Edmund, this is not what I wanted," she whispered, her voice cracking as she buried her face in her hands. Seeing her distress, Edmund, though perplexed, understood her pain. "I know this is not what you expected, but I will not harm you. You are my wife now, and I will do all I can to make this easier for you." But no words could heal the ache in Isabella's heart. The man she had dreamed of marrying was far from her, lost in the web of royal obligations and miscommunication. She lay there, alone in her sorrow, her tears soaking the pillow beside her. As the night wore on, Prince Edmund remained beside her, offering her the only comfort he could, the assurance that, despite everything, he would never force her to love him. But as his gentle hand rested on hers, Isabella knew that her heart would forever belong to another, no matter the distance between them. Isabella had tears in her eyes and a wave of pain was running through her heart. When she looked at Edmund, her heart was broken. The person she wanted from the depths of her heart was not in front of her. Edmund, who was very different from Lucas, was just a stranger to her, and her relationship with him felt completely unnatural. Edmund looked at her and said softly, "Isabella, I know this is all very complicated, and you are in pain. I am not what you want, but I do not want to hurt you." There was truth in his words, but Isabella's heart was not comforting her. Isabella said, hiding her emotions, "You cannot give me the happiness I dreamed of. I love Lucas, not you." Edmund bowed his head, and there was a hint of sadness in his eyes, but he knew that Isabella's love would never be for him. He quietly wiped away Isabella's tears and said, "I understand your pain, and I will not force you, but I promise you will not have any trouble from me." Isabella took a deep breath, and the intensity of her pain increased even more. She was thinking about how her fate had tied her to another relationship, taking her away from truth and love. She knew that now it was impossible to meet or pursue Lucas. The king's decision, his command over her fate, had shattered all her dreams. In the silence of the night, Isabella closed her eyes and tried to listen to the whispers of Lucas's memories in her heart. Her heart still yearned for Lucas, and in her dreams the moments when they would have been together in freedom and love were passing by. But those moments had now become mere memories, and Isabella was realizing that perhaps she would never be destined to find the true love she wanted. Edmund saw the sadness in her eyes and tried to console himself that he could at least give Isabella peace and comfort. But he knew that his heart would always be lost in the memory of Lucas. For him, Isabella's smile could never be complete unless she was close to Lucas. On that honeymoon, Isabella and Edmund's hearts were far from each other and were held together by a false promise in the longing for a dream. A few days later, Lucas, who had accumulated countless pains and sorrows in his heart, thinking about his fate, arrived in Vienna. There was a faint ray of hope in his heart that perhaps he would be able to see Isabella again. Perhaps he would be able to talk to her about his feelings. He knew that the king's decision had changed both of their lives, but the intensity of his love for Isabella in his heart remained the same. Lucas was told at the gate of the palace that Isabella and Edmund had been married, and that they were now together. This news struck Lucas like lightning. He had sunk into deep depression, but he continued to walk towards the palace, longing to see Isabella again. When he reached a quiet room in the palace, he stopped in surprise. Isabella, who was tied to her fate, was standing by a window, as if she were immersed in the depths of some sorrow. Her face was sad, and her eyes held countless questions and unfinished stories. "Isabella?" Lucas called her name in a soft voice. Isabella raised her head and looked at Lucas, and there was deep sadness in her eyes. She came in front of him, and the two came close to each other. Their eyes were lost in each other. Isabella's lips moved, but she could not speak. There was a storm of emotions in her heart, which was crushing her. "You said you would never leave me," Isabella said softly, her voice echoing with despair and pain. "I am always with you, Isabella, and I always will be, no matter what the world does," Lucas replied, his voice deep in love and sorrow. A moment of silence fell between the two. Time seemed to have stopped. Their fates had separated them, but their hearts could never be separated from each other. "We will never be happy, Lucas," Isabella said, her voice laced with reproach and defeat. "We will both always be lost to the ruthlessness of this world and to fate." Lucas looked into her eyes and said, "The love we have made will never end, whether we are apart or close." They stood before each other, and there was a silent pain in their hearts. that could never end. Suddenly, Isabella's body began to feel weak, and her heart stopped for the last time. Isabella looked at Lucas, and a final smile came to her lips. Her body had become lifeless, and she collapsed into his arms. Lucas had tears in his eyes, and he was holding Isabella in his arms. There was a deep void in his heart that could never be filled. "We are together forever, Isabella," Lucas said softly. They both left each other forever after that day, as if the world had failed to understand their love. Their love and pain were like a moment, and their lives ended in the painful reality that sometimes the intensity of love is helpless in the hands of fate. The story of their love echoed in the walls of the palace, and their memories always lived in the palace where fate had pursued them.